If your gray hair looks dull, yellow, or flat by the middle of the day, no matter how carefully you styled it that morning, the problem is almost never the gray itself. It is one of 6 small, completely fixable habits quietly working against the exact color sitting on your head right now. 6 silver hair mistakes are about to change how your color looks in every mirror, every photo, and every room you walk into. And the one waiting at number 1 creates the single biggest visual transformation on this entire list. Stay with me all the way through because that final fix is the one most women never even know exists, and it has nothing to do with a new product. Before we start, I want to say something clearly because it changes how you hear everything else in this video. Gray and silver hair is not something to apologize for, hide, or rush to cover. Done well, it can look luminous, dimensional, and genuinely elegant, the kind of hair color people stop you to ask about in the grocery store or at a dinner table. The 6 mistakes coming up are not about your hair being wrong. They are about small daily habits that quietly rob naturally beautiful gray hair of its shine, its depth, and its brightness, often without you ever realizing exactly why or which single habit is actually responsible. None of these fixes require giving up on gray or going back to permanent color. They require 6 small corrections done in the right order so your natural color finally gets to look as rich as it is capable of looking. The biggest fix, the one that decides whether your gray reads as elegant or as simply faded, is saved for the very last spot on this list. Every section between here and there builds toward exactly why that final fix matters so much, so do not skip ahead. Think of these 6 less as separate tricks and more as layers, where each one prepares your color for the next. Let's start at number 6, toning imbalance, which is very often the very first thing a stranger notices about anyone's gray hair, long before they consciously register why. Here is a habit that trips up more women with gray hair than almost anything else on this list, and it happens in 2 completely opposite directions, which is exactly why it is so easy to overcorrect straight from one mistake into the other without ever landing in the middle. Some women skip toning treatments entirely, and their gray slowly pulls warm and yellow, especially after washing with hard water or spending time in the sun, a shift so gradual that it often goes unnoticed until an old photo makes the change obvious. Others go the opposite direction, reaching for a purple or blue toning shampoo far too often, and their gray ends up with a harsh, flat, almost lavender cast that reads more artificial than elegant, especially in the unflattering light of an overhead fixture. Both mistakes come from treating toning as an all-or-nothing habit instead of a balance you adjust as you go, checking in with your own hair every couple of weeks, rather than setting a routine once and never revisiting it. Yellow, brassy gray looks tired and dated, aging the whole face around it in a way that has nothing to do with the woman wearing it. Overtoned, purple-tinted gray looks harsh under bright light and photographs strangely, especially in flash photography where the cool cast becomes even more pronounced. The correction is using a purple or blue toning shampoo only once or twice a week, never as your everyday shampoo, and watching how your color responds over the following days before deciding to use it again, rather than deciding on a fixed schedule and never adjusting it. If your hair starts looking cool and flat, pull back on toning for a week. If it starts looking warm and yellow again, bring it back into rotation. When you see your stylist, ask specifically for a toning consultation, since the right frequency depends on your particular water hardness, sun exposure, and how quickly your natural gray tends to pull warm, 3 factors that are different for almost every single woman, even within the same city. The mistake to avoid while correcting this is applying toning shampoo to fully dry hair and leaving it on too long out of habit, since dry hair absorbs pigment much faster and unevenly, which is exactly how harsh patchy toning happens, especially around the hairline and part where the hair tends to be most porous. Here is a simple mirror check you can do the very next time you catch yourself near a window. Step into natural daylight, not bathroom lighting, and look at your part and your ends carefully. If your part looks noticeably more yellow than your ends, you need more toning. If your ends look flat, ashy, or slightly purple, you need less. Check again after your very next wash, since toning needs shift with the seasons, with travel, and with how much time you spend in the sun. Number 5 is skipping a weekly gloss or moisture treatment, and this is where genuinely healthy gray hair starts looking dull for a completely different reason than color, one that has nothing to do with toning at all. Gray strands are structurally different from pigmented hair. The hair shaft tends to be more porous and slightly coarser, which means it reflects light less evenly than hair that still has its original pigment. In much the same way, a matte surface scatters light differently than a polished one. Without extra moisture and shine support, that coarser texture reads as flat, dry, and lackluster, even when the color itself is perfectly toned, which is exactly why so many women assume their toning is wrong when the real issue is sitting one step earlier in the routine. The correction is adding a weekly gloss or deep moisture treatment specifically formulated for gray or lightened hair, applied to damp hair and left on for the full recommended time rather than rinsed early to save a few minutes, since most of the actual benefit happens in those final few minutes you are tempted to skip. This single habit is often the difference between gray hair that looks dull and gray hair that looks genuinely luminous in photographs. The kind of difference people notice without being able to explain exactly what changed. Ask your stylist to recommend a glossing treatment suited to your specific hair porosity, since very porous gray hair often needs a richer formula than gray hair that is naturally less porous, and using the wrong weight of product can leave hair feeling either still dry or unpleasantly heavy. The mistake to avoid is applying a heavy gloss treatment to your roots the same way you apply it to your ends, since the treatment can weigh down new growth and make your roots look flat and separated from the rest of your color, almost like two different shades sitting side by side on the same head. Focus the richest part of the treatment from your mid-lengths to your ends, where the hair is older, drier, and needs it most. Try this mirror check tonight, right before you go to bed, when you have a quiet moment to actually pay attention. Take a single strand between two fingers and run them slowly down its length. If it feels rough, dry, or slightly straw-like rather than smooth, your hair is asking for more moisture support than it is currently getting, even if the color itself already looks perfectly toned. But toning and moisture are not the two mistakes doing the most damage on this list. The next one is quietly undoing both of the fixes you just learned, and it happens every single time you wash your hair without you ever suspecting it, hiding in plain sight inside a routine that feels perfectly gentle and responsible. Number 4 is skipping regular clarifying washes. And this is where I need to correct something almost every woman with gray hair has been told at some point by a well-meaning friend, article, or even a past stylist, which is to wash gently and never use anything that sounds strong, out of fear it will strip the very color she worked so hard to achieve. That advice is only half right, and the missing half is exactly why so much gray hair develops a dull, filmy buildup over time. Regular conditioners, styling products, and especially hard water all leave behind a thin mineral and product residue. And on gray or white hair, that residue is far more visible than it is on pigmented hair, because there is no underlying color to mask it. The result is hair that looks dull, slightly yellow, and strangely heavy no matter how much moisture treatment you add on top of it, almost as if the gloss and shine treatment from the previous fix is being trapped underneath a thin invisible film rather than actually reaching the hair itself. The correction is a proper clarifying shampoo used once every 2 to 3 weeks, not every wash, specifically to lift mineral buildup and product residue without stripping your color or your natural oils. This is not the same as washing more often. It is washing smarter on a specific schedule, treated almost like a reset button for your color rather than a replacement for your everyday routine. Ask your stylist whether your local water is considered hard water, since that single detail changes how often you personally need to clarify, sometimes as often as weekly if your water mineral content is especially high, and sometimes closer to once a month if your water is naturally soft. The mistake to avoid is using a clarifying shampoo every single time you wash out of an overcorrection instinct, since that strips away the very moisture and toning work you just did in the two fixes before this one, undoing your own progress before it ever has a chance to fully show. Here is your mirror check. After a normal wash with your regular products, look at your hair once it is fully dry under natural light, comparing it honestly to how it looked right after your last salon visit. If it looks slightly hazy, heavy, or less bright than it did right after a fresh clarifying wash, buildup is very likely part of what is dulling your color between salon visits, quietly undoing the effort you are already putting into toning and moisture. We are past the halfway point of this list now, and the fix waiting at number 1, the one that creates the single biggest visible transformation, is still ahead of you. Do not stop here, because everything from this point forward builds directly toward it, connecting the color care habits you just learned to how your gray actually looks on your face. Number 3 is wearing your gray in one completely flat, monochrome tone with no dimension built into it anywhere, which is a mistake that has nothing to do with how carefully you have been toning, moisturizing, or clarifying up to this point. Here is something that surprises a lot of women the first time they hear it. Solid, uniform gray, even when it is perfectly toned and beautifully glossy, can still read as flat and aging under regular indoor lighting, for the exact same reason a single flat wall color can make a room feel smaller than one with subtle shading and depth built into it. Hair with zero tonal variation absorbs light evenly across the whole head, which removes the natural sense of movement and dimension that younger-looking hair color typically has, regardless of whether that hair is gray, blonde, or brunette. The correction is asking your colorist for subtle lowlights or soft tonal weaving throughout your gray, not a return to your original hair color, simply gentle variations in depth that catch and reflect light differently across different sections of your head. This creates the appearance of natural movement and depth, the same quality that makes naturally graying hair in its earliest, most complemented stages look so effortlessly rich before it has fully transitioned to one uniform tone. Ask specifically for a low-maintenance, low-light pattern designed to grow out softly, so you are not committing to frequent root touch-ups just to maintain the dimension, since the entire appeal of this fix depends on it staying simple and easy to live with. The mistake to avoid is asking for too much tonal variation at once, since heavy, dramatic streaking can look artificial and actually work against the elegant, cohesive look you are going for, undoing the very softness that made gray hair beautiful in the first place. Subtlety is the entire point of this fix, and it is worth repeating twice. Here is a simple mirror check. Stand under a bright overhead light and look at your reflection from about arm's length away, the same distance someone would naturally stand from you in conversation. If your hair looks like one completely flat block of color with no visible movement or depth anywhere, even a small amount of tonal variation will make a noticeable difference, often more difference than an entire bottle of gloss treatment could achieve on its own. Number 2 is overusing high heat on your gray hair without adequate protection. And this mistake compounds quietly over months, rather than showing up immediately after a single blowout, which is exactly why so many women never connect the dullness they see to the styling tool sitting on their bathroom counter. Gray hair, because it is already more porous and structurally more fragile than pigmented hair, is significantly more vulnerable to heat damage, and repeated exposure to high heat without protection gradually roughens the hair's outer surface, strand by strand, week after week, long before you would ever notice a single dramatic moment of damage. That roughened surface scatters light instead of reflecting it smoothly, which is exactly what creates that dry, coarse, straw-like appearance so many women associate with gray hair, when it is actually a heat damage issue rather than a color issue at all, and one that has nothing to do with your natural gray itself. The correction is using a proper heat protectant on damp hair before any styling tool touches it, and lowering the heat setting on your tools by at least one full level from what you have been using, even if that feels like a small, almost inconsequential adjustment at first. Gray hair styles beautifully at lower temperatures than most women realize, precisely because there is no pigment left to protect from fading, which means you can afford to be gentler without sacrificing how well your style holds through the rest of your day. Ask your stylist to recommend a heat protectant specifically formulated for lightened or gray hair, since these are typically lighter in weight and will not leave a dulling film behind, unlike some heavier formulas designed for other hair types that can sit on top of gray strands and mute their natural brightness. The mistake to avoid is applying heat protectant unevenly, focusing only on the ends while leaving your mid-lengths and roots completely unprotected, since heat damage accumulates everywhere the tool actually touches, not just at the ends. And roots that are never protected eventually show the same roughness as ends that were neglected for years. Try this simple test, ideally on a day when you have not used any styling tools at all. Take a small section of hair and gently pull it between your fingers from root to end, paying attention to how the texture changes along the way. If you feel rough patches or notice small flyaway breaks along the length rather than one smooth, even texture, heat damage is very likely part of what is dulling your color, even if the toning and moisture underneath it are both perfectly correct. But the very last fix on this list creates a transformation none of the other 5 can fully deliver on their own, and it is the one detail almost nobody thinks to check before it is too late, even women who have been managing their gray beautifully for years. And here it is, the fix that earns the #1 spot, matching your gray to your skin's undertone, the one correction that ties together everything you have already worked to improve. If I could correct only one thing for every woman with gray or silver hair who asks me for advice, it would be this, without hesitation, because it is the single detail that decides whether your gray reads as luminous or as washed out the moment people look at your face before they even register anything else about your hair. Here is why it matters more than anything else on this list. Gray hair is not one single shade. It ranges from cool, icy platinum tones all the way through neutral silvers to warm pearl and champagne tones, and every one of those variations interacts completely differently with your natural skin undertone in exactly the same way a cool-toned blonde or a warm-toned brunette would flatter one complexion and clash with another. Wearing a gray that fights against your undertone instead of complementing it is the single fastest way to make an otherwise beautifully cared-for color look tired, harsh, or washed out, even when every other fix on this list has already been done perfectly, from the toning to the gloss to the dimension. The correction is a simple undertone match. If your skin has warm undertones, meaning gold or peachy tones show clearly in your complexion, a warmer pearl or champagne-toned gray will genuinely light up your whole face, softening lines and brightening your eyes in a way that feels almost immediate. If your skin has cool undertones, meaning pink or blue tones dominate, a cooler, icier silver tone will do the same thing in the opposite direction, creating that same fresh, lit-from-within quality but through a completely different tonal path. Ask your colorist specifically for an undertone consultation before your next toning appointment, since this single conversation often changes the entire toner formula they reach for, even if the difference sounds subtle when they describe it out loud in the chair. Bring a photo taken in natural daylight if you possibly can, since salon lighting can make undertone assessments surprisingly difficult even for an experienced, well-trained colorist. The mistake to avoid is choosing a gray shade purely because you saw it look beautiful on someone else, since the exact same tone that looks luminous on a cool undertone can look flat and gray in the least flattering sense on a warm undertone, and the reverse is just as true, no matter how much you personally admire that particular shade on the woman wearing it. Here is your mirror check, and it is the most important one in this entire video. Hold a piece of gold jewelry and a piece of silver jewelry up near your face in natural daylight, one at a time, giving your eyes a moment to actually register the difference rather than rushing the comparison. Whichever one makes your skin look brighter and more awake is a strong clue toward whether your gray should lean warm or cool. Once this detail is corrected properly and given time to settle, women consistently and repeatedly tell me the difference is not subtle at all. It is the moment their gray finally stops looking like something they are simply living with day after day and starts looking like a color they genuinely chose on purpose, the same way a woman might choose any other hair color she loved on purpose. Here is what I hope you take away from all 6 of these. Your gray hair was never the problem, and it never needed fixing in the way that word usually implies. It was simply waiting for the right balance of toning, moisture, clarity, dimension, protection, and undertone to finally let it shine the way it was always capable of shining. Correct the toning balance, add the moisture back in, clear away the buildup, build in gentle dimension, protect it from unnecessary heat, and finally match it to your own undertone. And gray hair that has felt flat or tired for years can genuinely look luminous within a matter of weeks, without a single trip back to permanent color and without ever apologizing for the color you are already wearing. So take a slow breath. Think back through these 6 fixes one more time, from the toning all the way to the undertone match, and be honest with yourself about which one you have never actually tried, even the ones that sounded too simple to make a real difference. Which of these 6 silver hair fixes will you try first this week?